and SASS and other stuff.
Well, yeah, for the English speakers, the 2 out of the words you must understand. But SASS, Tetris, and other toys. Well, our first talk by Dan was a very practical overview of an entire project and how to handle responsive design. Arjan had presented a very functional plugin that you can use in your own code. And my talk will be neither of those, but I think it will be fun. Well, we're not only professionals, but we all also like to make websites, like to work on the web. So, Arjan asked me to present how I built a very nice effect into my website, and because tonight was about responsive web design. And this will be my only slide for tonight. The rest will be, you don't have to look at this for the entire evening, the rest will be in the browser and the text editor, which is where you feel much more at home, I guess. This is my website. I'm a freelance web developer, front-end, so I have to have a website. And I want to keep it fairly simple. It's just one page, a little introduction, some work, contact, a bit about Fronteers, of course, the most important part. And but I want to make it add some cool stuff in there. For instance, all the Tetris blocks. When I chose to Tetris as a theme for my website, it had some very cool implications, because the Tetris blocks, you can make many variations with the same system. So they're all different, but they are unified. And that's why I put all my work in one of those blocks. And, well, you might see a problem, because everything in the browser is rectangular, whether you like it or not. For instance, the L-shaped form entirely is a link, but you wouldn't want, when you hover over here, you wouldn't want to click here, you wouldn't want to click on the other shape. And that was the first challenge I had to face, to make them all fit together, because if you put them all apart, it looks kind of lame and, well, you won't win at Tetris anyway. So I used, next I will explain, after this, I'll explain how I achieved this effect of having links where you can click on odd shapes. And this was possible because the Tetris shapes are always made out of 4 squares. Anyway, here's an overview of all the possible Tetris shapes. And I put them just below each other. This is very handy for myself for reference, because when I add something new to my portfolio, I have to use this. But the real trick, of course, is the responsive design. When it's like this, the blocks are, for instance, the Prisma Talbotto block is an, kind of like an L-shaped, facing downwards. But when I move and make the window smaller, the same block becomes a different shape. And this is done without JavaScript, it's pure CSS, and actually with a lot of help of SASS. You see all the blocks change shape. If I make it even smaller, they get yet another shape. You can see my logo is now on its side, and here it's back up again. And all the other shapes are again changed with only CSS. Of course, nobody will actually see this because normal people only use the browser at one side. So I put a lot of effort into something only you guys will ever see, probably. But that's okay, because I'm a front-end web developer and I like playing with this kind of stuff. So maybe it's not very practical, but it's a lot of fun and it pushes me to learn more about the technique I'm using. And in this case I learned a lot about SASS, which I will get into a bit later. And also because I'm, a lot of times when I get hired for a job, probably another front-end web developer will look at my site and they are exactly the kind of people who play around with the width of the browser nowadays. So for that purpose, it actually is practical. Well, next, how to build the shapes, first of all. Well, sorry for the English speakers, but it doesn't matter. The HTML is fairly simple. This is one block. It's a link with some stuff in it, and on the link element, all the magic happens really. Because nowadays we're in HTML5, I can put block level elements in links. It's okay. Although not everybody is a fan of it, but it was for this option. It was the only for this purpose. It was the only real option. There's an image always. It has some text in it with a title and a definition list about what I did at the project. And this is without style. This is the image, the title, the text, and with style it looks like this. Well, how did I build it? Because as you can see over here, you can see that I'm hovering, and here I'm not, even though I'm within the rectangle. Actually, the link element itself is 0 width, so you can't hover over it. But the cool thing is, when you're using pseudo elements on a link, those are clickable. So you can make, well, a bit odd shapes. Well, not everything, but I was lucky that I chose Tetris as a theme, because they're always shaped like this. Well, here's an example how to build this shape. There's a before element and there's an after element. I give the thick border. On the after element I leave one side open and I slide them over one of each other, and then we have a Tetris shape. And another example is a T-shaped block. Same principle. Leave one side open and slide it over the before element, and you have the block, and the border is perfect. Well, and then the Z block, same principle, a Z-shaped block, before, after, but this time when you slide them over each other, there's a bit of a problem, because you can't just leave off this part of the border. So I had to find another solution, which of course was using the element that contains the text, the small after element to cover up the black bar, and that way you hack yourself around all problems you ever faced. Well, this is the result. And another interesting thing I think is this image that we saw before actually is the width of two of these parts of the block and the height also, and it's positioned absolute. That means I can use a clip to get part of the image. If I turn off the clip, you can see actually the image is much bigger, but I'm clipping it. And because this 2x2 shape, I can use it in, I'm not turning off all the stuff. I can use it in any Tetris shape. So it's really flexible. Every piece of content can be put into any of the Tetris shapes. And that's where I can really start to play once I built the system, which took me effort, but once I have it, it's very easy to play around and try things out and put it in shapes. Well, I will demonstrate some, we'll get into code now. Here's the entire page, and I will show you what I did with SASS to make it happen. First of all, who of you has worked with SASS before, or maybe less? And who of you have heard about it? I will get into some very small basics, but it's, SASS and less is basically a language that compiles to CSS and adds some nice features like variables and functions and mixins. I explain that a little bit in a bit. But, most of it is plain CSS, but you have some more options. I don't think it will be too hard, but if you don't understand what I'm saying, please raise your hand or shout something. Please don't throw anything. Well, it's a bit dark actually. Is it possible to read or is it too dark?
Choose a theme.
Yeah, how do you do that?
It's I think file. It's the Sublime, right?
Preference one?
Color schemes there.
Ah, yeah, color schemes. Black or mine?
Oop.
And
It's
Idle
worse.
is pretty white.
Which one?
Solarized light.
Amy or?
Idle.
Solarized.
Yes.
this
I
is
don't.
light.
What?
Solarized light.
Well,
at the
Ah,
bottom.
that one. Ah, yeah. Thank you guys. I learned something new about my text editor. Well, the top part is not really important, but you just import other files into it. Like you can include other CSS files in normal CSS, but this actually pulls it into the same file, so you don't get extra requests. Here's a small another cool feature that SASS gives you is the ability to create mix-ins. For instance, you can create a mix-in for default font family, and when you use it, it will be copied. The text that's in here will actually be copied into here. And here's another example. And you can give arguments to this variable a fallback, and you can use it here. The default is sans serif, so if you don't give anything, like over here, it will be read font family Verdana fallback, not fallback, sans serif. But if you really don't like people that don't even have Verdana on their system, so you can always give them Comic Sans, of course. And class number 2 will read font family Verdana, Comic Sans, and color red. This is very useful for a piece of code that you use again and again in your site. For instance, clear fixes, or if you have different fonts that sometimes you have to change. Well, that's a very nice feature. And we have functions, which is almost the same, except what they return. Okay, we also give arguments, except you have to actually return things. And here, just everything that's in there, here, will be returned automatically and put in place. And here you also give back the property and the value. And here, you just give back a value and it can be used whatever way you like. This gives more flexibility. For instance, if I want to use this units number that comes out of this with a width or margin or padding, it's very flexible. I can just put it in there. So that's the advantage of functions, and mix-ins are a bit more convenient. So it depends on the situation which you want to use. Well, building the Tetris blocks is actually very easy. You just put it in here and put this there, and then you have a Tetris block. For instance, a Tetris block O, this variable, if I give the value of that to the function of content text, which is just a regular selector in CSS, it will make this shaped Tetris block, which is a square. For instance, content text, you can see on the side is actually this square. That's why it's that shape. And same goes for the main header. It's the shape Z1, which is that shape, and on the website you can see it's the same shape. Well, now the real question, of course, is and secondly, there is I use media queries to adjust the layout from 480 pixels and up, and 639 I use this piece of code, which I won't get into, and the next media query is this piece of code, and for this media query I put the actual content that's in this file. I just put it here for you to see. And you can see here I'm using the same function again, but now this is the original one that we saw up top, and this is the new one, and I pass the same selectors in different things. And maybe you'll notice that contact text I didn't pass again because it just leaves the default. It's build model first, so I'm not overriding anything. But the other ones I'm overriding. Now I have to be very careful to leave the specificity of each Tetris object the same, otherwise it would cause problems. For instance, over here, on the smallest size, word Prisma is a T1, which is not yet, which is on this side, it's a T shape. And over here it is L5, which is an L-shaped and variant number 5, which you can see if I put it up. So I'm actually using the same function again, same mixin again, to override the previous values. And that is very useful because if I would do this in plain CSS, I would be repeating a lot of work, and it would be really hard to do this, and even harder to maintain. So I think it will be interesting to see how it actually works. And for that I have here, this is the function. I make a mixin with a lot of arguments, which the programmers among you might find a bad practice to give so many arguments to a function, but I have to make it work. And this is just for niceness. I can also put in position absolute, and then the thing will put position absolute. But I didn't really need that. And this is just for some optimization, but that's not really important. So I get all these selectors in here, and I want to make them into one big list. So I can use it over here as one selector, separated by commas, so the basic values, the basic things to build a Tetris block get applied to all the blocks. For instance, display block, the margin, the width, and the z-index. And the absolute positioning of the images, just make some defaults on which I can build the rest of the Tetris blocks. But the problem is, in here I get all these values, and they are within quotes, and they are different lists. So I have to concatenate them, but if I concatenate them, I can concatenate them including quotes, which is a bit problematic because then it's not a valid selector, because if you have a quote dot class and a quote is not, it won't work as a selector. The future is actually useful for instance when you're using quotes around a font name, then it's very useful. That's in CSS and SASS. It's one of the examples where you find the oddness of using a programming language within a declarative language like CSS. Anyway, I give all the arguments. This is the result to return. This is actually what I just explained. And in the end, I need this. Class 1, class 2 with the comma separated, so they all get the properties in the CSS. For that I use a loop from 1 to the end of this entire list. I join them together, loop through them, and add them together with a comma in between, and remove the quotes. So I have actually something useful. This part took me the most. It looks really simple now, and actually it is once you know what you're doing. But I think this was really for me the hardest part to figure out how to properly remove the quotes and append them together, and make sure there are no extra commas, because then SASS won't compile. But now I think it's really a cool example of just doing something out of the ordinary and something you don't really know what you're doing. But that's really the way to really learn about a new language or a new technique. And I would hope that you all would do something similar. Well, for the first Tetris block, yeah, it's just the defaults. I put the image in the top left, text also in the top left, and there I have some defaults. I'm also using quite a few functions over here, as you can see, and that's to help me make the calculation easier, because I have to calculate the width of every block very precise, otherwise it will look like a mess. I can give you maybe a bit of an easier example. Let's see which one. Oh, maybe the oh, let's try the first one again. Yeah, there we are. Well, if the Tetris L5 is empty, we don't do any. If it's not empty, we actually build it. If it's empty, we don't build it because we don't need it. Well, this is the selector. There's a second model here. And I'm giving it a height of 3 blocks. And actually, if I make this, for instance, 4, save it, and wait for SASS to compile. I don't really see this. Refresh the page, and will actually be 1 higher. I think.
Yeah, it is.
Order or something.
Or not? No, it's actually not. I'm. What I did wrong. I'm using the A element itself, but it's 0. The width is 0, so you don't see it. I actually need to be adjusting the before and the after. If I make this one 1 higher, now it covers 5 blocks. And it's probably behind the other one. That's not taking much. You see now it's 1 higher. So it's very easy for me to build these Tetris blocks once you have these functions. And it's also very easy to see, look at the code and see what the blocks are like. For instance, this block, the before, it's 3 blocks wide. The height is 1 block high, so it's 3 by 1. And the after, the width is 1 block, and the height is also 1 block. So it's probably it's an L shape with 3 on top and 1 on the bottom. And it's moved over 2 blocks from the left, so it's an L shape with 3 white on the top, and on that side you have the bottom shape. So I wrote a lot of helper functions to make it easy, to make it even manageable for myself. And I can show you a bit about how I made those blocks. I sorted those functions. Well, the basic is I use 18 pixels as a basic measure. It's the width of the border of 1 Tetris block. So it's the width of the black line, and everything else is a multiplication of 18. And I did some very small tweaking to get the text to exactly fall on the baseline on these lines you can see here. So it looks as a very nice vertical rhythm. And the inside of a block is actually 7 times the thickness of a border. And I think this, to be very precise with something like this, is important, because otherwise you will really confuse yourself and make a big mess out of it. And it has a certain aesthetic that I kind of like. So, if I want to debug it, I don't know why I chose 5, but if debug is 5, I use RAM units, because it's easier to play around with that in the console. If I want to make something twice as big, I just make from one RAM to 2 RAMs. For those that don't know what RAMs are, it's like an M unit, but it's always relative to the HTML element. The problem is, it's very nice, but the problem is it's not very well supported, so I didn't want to use it in production. So there I just multiply it by 18 pixels, and we have the same effect because the size of the body of the HTML font size is 18. This is just to help add some pixels to pixel perfect it. Well, cover inside block. It returns the number of blocks. So a block to show you is this width or this height. And that's a nice way to think about how to build it mathematically. I multiplied it by the units in blocks, so how wide the block is, and I multiplied by 1 to get the correct pixels or RAM or whatever. And then I have the insides of every block. But blocks also have borders. And if you have just one block, you have the outside border and here the outside border. But if you have 2 blocks, you have 2 outside borders and 1 inside border. So I had to adjust for that, so that I can make the correct width of a Tetris element. Is it possible to follow what I'm saying, or I'm talking nonsense? Oh, thank you. And as an example, if I want to make the width of this element 2 blocks, I can just give that as an argument. And I have it for inside blocks, outside blocks, and to move blocks, and I can use margins to position them. And actually the positioning of the blocks, where they all grab into each other, is not done in this function, but that's done by hand, because you can't really calculate it how you want to put it together. If you want to move those to the side or up, and they play with each other in different ways. There it is. For instance, the margin, it's moved 1 block to the top, it's the top margin, and 2 blocks to the side. So if you actually look at the WDEE, which is this block, it was moved 1 block up because they all stack on top of each other, so you have to move them up a bit. It's just trial and error. And to the side, so it's not here, but it's to the side. This block actually is also moved 2 blocks to the side, because otherwise it would start here. And well, because I didn't use the margins for anything else yet, I can use them very well for this and make everything fit together. So, well, and this results in a very cool effect for the responsive design geeks out there. I'm quite happy how it turned out, and I learned a lot about SASS and how to use it in weird ways. Wow, that was it, really.